Live from Jefferson City, it's the This Week in Missouri Politics Midweek Update with Scott Faughn.
Welcome into This Week in Missouri Politics Midweek Update. I'm Scott Faughn, joined by the one, the only, the legendary, the voice of Missouri, the Missouri House, Speaker Pro Tem Chad Perkins. Welcome to the show, sir.
Legendary. I'll take that. I don't know that the legend is...
If you're,
there might be a million stories. They're not all true.
If you're listening to this, you'll know that voice, that baritone. Peter Kinder kind of has a baritone, a little gravelly baritone. That radio voice you have, I would recognize it almost anywhere.
If I had hair like Peter Kinder, I wouldn't be on the radio, though. I'd be hosting a game show or something.
That's about right.
Yeah.
Yes, but yes, Peter could never host a game show because he would be very critical of everyone, and it would be a little interesting. But let's talk about the Missouri House of Representatives. You're getting underway.
Yeah.
I'm getting text as we sit here of people that are getting notified of how they're going to serve the House on committee chairmanships and things. So you're getting your, I guess, House in order.
That's right.
You got the rules package done. There was a little bit of fuss about it.
But honestly, we had that debate. Today is Wednesday. We had that debate, I guess, yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And if you think back to 2 years ago, and how that debate played out on the floor, there was like 2 or 3 weeks worth of messages we got because there was a big debate about women's dress code 2 years ago. Remember that?
Yes.
And 2 years ago was a big deal. We didn't have any of that. I mean, this rules package went through with very little debate. We were in and out in an hour or so.
There's really just one rule in the Missouri House of Representatives. Have 82 votes.
You got to have 82 votes.
And if you have 82 votes, you can suspend the rules, you
That's
can turn back time, you can go. I watched when the Republicans first took over. I was here in Jeff City. And they had no idea what to do. I mean, they hadn't run the place since the 50s. And the Tom Villa, an old former alderman, was the president of the board of aldermen in St. Louis. Was doing, like, I think just for fun. He was a state rep, and he used to tie them up into the most hilarious knots just for his own personal amusement. Tom was a tremendous legislator, but he knew the rules. But what came down? Crowell was the first Republican floor leader. Crowell basically would just get 82 votes and suspend the rules and rewind it and go back and undo whatever he did and then not call on him.
You don't have to be a genius to run the House of Representatives, but you got to be able to count to 82.
That's, yes. Yeah. So, to me, it was odd, right? Sparks presented himself as the more conservative option. And, he's only done it for 2 years. But I did see I watched his video. I didn't get to see them all, but I did watch the one where he kind of had some proposed rule changes because I thought it's interesting. That's actually a policy thing of note.
It's a policy thing, yes.
Well, but I mean, I get it, but it reminded me, it was the exact same, very similar rule package that Paul Lavoda, when he was the Democrat floor leader, proposed for the 9 and 10 session.
It's funny that he presented himself as the more conservative choice, but the rules package he promoted only promoted or gave larger voices to liberal ideas, right? Yeah. It said if you get 41 or 42 co-sponsors, it goes to the committee, or it goes to committee and so forth. Well, every Democrat bill would go to committee. And when you're in the majority, the Speaker's job is to see that the policies that your party doesn't promote never sees the light of day.
Well, let me ask you this on this amendment thing, right? I know the Senate rules much better than I know the House rules. Because I've always, to go back to, again, there's really only one rule when it really boils down in the House. But under the rules package you can't do amendments to the amendment, right?
You can't do amendments to, you can't do amendments to the amendment once the amendment you're on has been read in and you become speaking.
Okay,
right?
Here's the thing. You did make it harder for Democrats or any member to hijack the floor. But you also protected your members from votes the Democrats want to put you on record for.
That's exactly right. So
it's a trade-off.
Every session, the Democrats will do something like, and we'll be talking about good Second Amendment stuff, right?
Sure.
Republican red meat things. And then a Democrat will go to the sidebar there and get an amendment drafted that comes out and says that a 6-month-old can't be in possession of a bazooka in the middle of the street.
And where you're from, they want 6-year-olds to have a bazooka in the street. But where a lot
Exactly.
of your tough races are, Phil Oler King's district
Exactly
does
right.
not want kids with bazookas.
I can vote for that all day long. It won't hurt
And
me a
they'll
bit.
praise you.
But there are parts of the state
But
where
Ben
we have
Kingsley can't.
that are represented by Republicans where that's a tough vote. Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I will tell you for just a little, for a fact, like they had a bill, they put an amendment out last year that said something like, and I might be a year or two off on it, but something like, a 13-year-old can't be in possession of a firearm on government-owned property. Well, if you're where I live and you go out to Raniker Wildlife Area, which is owned by the state of Missouri, where people hunt all the time, every kid out there would be guilty of a crime. No, I don't think so. I say to that, okay, you might have a problem in St. Louis City. Get your house in order. That's not a statewide problem.
Okay, but let me flip that back. You're a cop. They say back the blue, right? Mm-hmm. And I bet you back the blue. Mm-hmm. I've watched you vote and sponsor bills and help maneuver things to back the blue. By the way, shout out to Izzy's for an outstanding lunch. If you're in downtown Jeff City, hit it up. When you talk to cops in St. Louis, they say we would be able to fight crime better if we had more gun control laws.
They do say that. Now, with that being
So
said,
back the blue after the Second Amendment, then we don't back the blue anymore.
but not all police are on the same page on this topic, right? There is a divide there that is rural and urban.
Okay, let me ask you this. Why would you not take some crime zones that are in extremely high crime areas? We could circle them on a map in St. Louis. We all know where they are. And say, okay, in this area, you can't have a gun. Now, I'll take the same guy that's going out to Rainer State Park, right, with his kid and with his 10-year-old kid and shooting squirrels.
Okay.
They ain't never going to be in North St. Louis.
Well, here's the thing, Scott. So,
Are they?
What I'll
Has
say-
anybody that's ever shot a squirrel in Rainer National Park ever intentionally went to North St. Louis?
well, I don't know. On your way to Fast Eddie's, I suppose, you go through North St. Louis County. But
St. Louis County.
that's
You
right.
don't go-
Maybe not North St. Louis City.
I
but-
can tell you this right now. There is no one that hunts ducks
Yeah.
at Otter Slough in Neelyville or in Puxico, Missouri, that ever goes to North St. Louis. It
Well,
is
so-
not their problem.
So, as we pointed out before,
Is it the camel under the tent?
as we pointed out before, many times before, when it comes to these gun-related issues, they're wanting to add a new crime in there, right? Well, the fact is, if you fire that weapon in that area, you might already be guilty of a crime. You don't need new laws. You need to enforce the laws and prosecute the laws you already have.
I'm with you. I love the fact this is the most Mike Kehoe thing ever. I saw Jason Rosenbaum had a kind of synopsis of his speech, and it was about crime or public safety and economic development. And I actually think that listening to Mike Kehoe, and I have to be a little careful. I have a high regard for Mike Kehoe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always try to be the pessimistic German that gives you his real opinion, but my real opinion is I really think really highly of Mike Kehoe. I do think it's a very ambitious goal. I think it's politically stupid. I think Mike Kehoe touching St. Louis crime is dumb. In your entire life, have you ever thought North St. Louis was safe? Because I never have in my entire life.
No, but I'll tell you what he is doing with crime that's just fantastic. He's really promoting this idea that if you're peddling fentanyl and somebody dies from that fentanyl, you can be charged with murder. And that's a priority for the governor. I think it's a great idea that these fentanyl dealers are held to a higher threshold. Man, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
And all that. But overall, your lovely girlfriend, if she was going to take 3 of her friends and go to dinner on Washington Avenue, you'd be like, whoa.
It wasn't that long ago.
I know, but
Wasn't that
today,
there was a piano bar on Wash Avenue. We used to
The
go to all the
Dubliner
time.
was a great bar.
Yeah. So, but my point is, my constituents have every right to go to a baseball game, go to a hockey game, visit these things that I've always enjoyed doing, without a fear of being the victim of a crime and nobody doing anything about it. My constituents have every right to that as well.
I get you. To me, I'm torn. I think you should have a right to carry a gun wherever you want in North St. Louis. I also think, practically speaking, listening to people that are experts, it might help them fight crime, which is a major problem. But off the gun control thing, politically, Mike Kehoe could go do a lot of things with his honeymoon, with his mandate.
That first year that you have a new governor, that's his honeymoon time period, that first session. This is a year we get some things done.
So you do that, but before you do that, right? you're in that. You decide to make crime. I think it's bold. I think it's courageous. I think it's a little stupid because I just don't know that you're going to be able to convince me or take me out of it. I think you're going to convince Flat Doug that North St. Louis is safe, regardless of what the state of Missouri does. Am I wrong? I'm worried about it, is what I guess I'm trying to say.
The perception of the fact, there's a perception and there's reality, right? But the fact of the matter is, the folks in St. Louis City, North St. Louis City, have every right to good policing as everybody else in the state of Missouri does. It's a disservice to the people that live there.
I agree with you. End of the day, though, I think that this crime package, because if you pass this, you own it, but really Governor Kehoe owns it.
He's
Governor Kehoe's crime
He's the one who's pushed it, but it's something that I think that
you're in
we
on
can all get on.
But I think at the end of the day,
yeah.
this is the governor's like the quarterback. He gets a little more credit and blame no matter whatever happens.
I'm built more like a lineman these days.
Can he? Do you really believe that there are legislative things you can do that'll substantially lower the crime in the city of St. Louis?
Absolutely. In fact,
you believe that?
I do.
And you're a cop. You really believe?
I absolutely do.
What is the top three things you could do?
My ideas might even go on beyond those, right? But for example, you look at what we did last year with Kim Gardner resigning. Mm-hmm. Now, Kim Gardner was not going to resign until we put that pressure on.
I don't think Andrew Bailey gets the credit he deserves for it.
He, the Attorney General, the legislature was pushing some things. The Attorney General came out strong with it, and St. Louis is better off because of it. And my constituents are better off because of it. So to suggest that Jefferson City can't do things to affect how well St. Louis has ran isn't true. We did it last year.
I think the best argument to take for state control of the police is that, frankly, in the 15 years they've had local control, let's be honest, has there been some wonderful, innovative policing that has dramatically reduced crime? I mean, I'm not saying it's fallen apart or worse, because it wasn't great before, is my point. But I don't think they've done such great work. They could be like, well, you could never look at all our successes. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's real. But by the same token, I just wonder, 5 years after you pass this, are you still going to feel comfortable with a group of women going out that you care about on Washington Avenue on a Friday night?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I expect there to be a good change.
What's the odds that the public perception of the city of St. Louis crime is better 5 years from now?
I don't know. I mean, it would be hard to say because there's a lot of variables to take place.
I'd say you got a 50-50 shot. And that's if you pass aggressive stuff.
But, even if you save one person, isn't that enough?
What if the state tried to take over your sheriff's department?
Y'all have the guns out. No, I don't have a problem.
Y'all have the guns out, right? If they came to Dexter, the folks at Dexter would be lining up on 60 ready to shoot the state vehicles.
Yeah. You know what? When the folks from the delegation from St. Louis argues against it, I understand their argument.
Yeah, I do too.
I disagree with them. I disagree. I completely understand their argument. Well, at the same time, I disagree with them.
I agree with them. I think that it is. If I was them, I'd be calling bullshit the whole time. I agree with their point. The only point, I do think the ends justify the means.
That's a strong argument.
And that's the only argument, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's wrong to take people's money out of a government. You dictate how that's spent. There's a fundamental wrong with that.
Do we not do it with school districts all the time?
And I think that's wrong.
Every time the state takes over a school district because the school district has proven it can't do it, we do it all the time. What's the difference?
Do you ever worry that constituents in your district and around the state get a little tired of the immense amount of focus and hours that Republicans who send Republicans there to represent them spend worried about a place that hasn't elected a Republican in 20 years?
You know what? The thing about the Missouri legislature in Jefferson City is we can multitask. I can have a 30-second conversation with someone on one topic and then turn around and have another 30-second conversation.
Yeah.
What I am not good at is when someone comes in and they spend 4 minutes to me explaining some history. Tell me what you need. If you're coming in to talk, get to what you need pretty quick because that's just how it works. So I don't need a 20-minute lecture. I can do this a lot. I'm familiar enough with most of the topics that we can make it happen fairly quickly.
Will you feel good about going back home in May if you pass a whole bunch of St. Louis legislation and you don't pass health insurance for farmers? That would actually help your district.
That's a great bill that I co-sponsored last year. More than happy to get on board with that one again.
Do you worry, though? As now, you're at the head of the table in the Missouri House, and you're going to be there longer than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
The question would be, though, do you ever worry that you focus a little too much on St. Louis?
We focus on St. Louis, but I wouldn't say too much. St. Louis ultimately, and the folks where I live understand this, is still the economic engine that powers certainly the eastern side of the state
That's
of
where I was
Missouri.
drawing key. When I saw Rosenbaum's headline, I didn't have a chance to read the story yet, but I saw the headline on Combest, and it said, Kehoe focuses on crime and economic development. I actually think what you were hitting on is where we went down the crime road, but I think it comes all the way back to economic development. Because if I had to guess, there's nothing you could do to spur economic development in St. Louis that have the perception that it is not downtown Beirut.
Yeah, I suppose, but there are things. I think it's altogether possible to do these things that focus on St. Louis, while at the same time passing health care for farmers, while at the same time limiting the liability that farmers take on when it comes to we have that Roundup legislation. So let me explain that for a second, if I can.
Yeah.
There's this idea that you can be sued if you're Roundup, which is a product that we all know, man. Every one of us has used it.
I don't care who you are. It's what time is it? It's 1:45.
Right.
You have ate a product that was grown with Roundup today.
That's right.
I don't give a damn unless you're in a coma. You've ate a product that Roundup helped grow.
Roundup can be sued because of its labeling right now, right? You can sue Roundup because of the way it's labeled. Now, don't keep in mind.
And they won't tell you what a label that would work would be. They won't even tell you how to write the
label. But the label that's on it is completely vetted and approved by the federal government. We're talking about one of the most highly regulated industries on the planet.
The label folds out like an accordion on that stuff.
So
we got to get our China bucket back out.
The other people making the product is China.
Yep.
So there's two reasons why you want to pass this. A, it's national security because the Chinese are the ones competing against it. And B, I don't want to pay a fortune for everything I eat. Mm-hmm. And so these frivolous lawsuits that go against this agriculture community, it drives the price of food up.
So in the House, Amendment 3.
Mm-hmm. Melanie Stinnett has a HJR. It's a really well-written, very smart HJR. An HJR, of course, is a House Joint Resolution, right? Put it back on the ballot. We're not overturning the will of the voter. We're putting it back on the ballot there so that the voter can take another look at something that is far better well-written than Amendment 3 was. And Melanie's HJR goes so far to say, and it takes in a part of it that was in Amendment 3 that I think a lot of people don't know was in Amendment 3, that it says you can't do transition surgeries up until a certain age. You can't do those medications for transitioning up until a certain age. I mean, that's reasonable language.
So, I mean, I think 3D Doug Beck would call the trans stuff ballot candy.
Okay.
I mean, I think the court, and I'm...
What would it be why would it be ballot candy for?
Well, because you're having multiple subjects going together.
But Amendment 3 had multiple subjects.
That's what I was going to say.
Amendment 3 was the worst written piece.
I roll my eyes every time we're in this other studio and a Democrat says, well, you're combining something. I'm like, whoa. No.
Amendment 3 had all kinds of
combined stuff in
things.
Amendment 3, and the Supreme Court of Missouri said, get after it, kid. I think part of IP reform, whatever IP reform you end up doing, I know you have to do abortion first, but if you ever overturn Amendment 3, you do IP reform. I hope you'll address that.
Yeah.
Because I think people deserve to have a straight-up question. Now, I watched. Let me play devil's advocate for a second. I think that the truth is the bill that was passed took the state more pro-life than it was.
The bill that was passed
in
the House last year.
No, back in 2018.
Okay.
The trigger laws and all that stuff. I do think, in my gut, it might have took the abortion issue a little too pro-life. Mm-hmm. But I think not, maybe a little. But the Amendment 3, we are one of the most abortion-encouraging jurisdictions in the world right now. Missouri, abortion is pushed more in Missouri than almost anywhere on the entire globe.
Did you know in Amendment 3 it allows for abortions if you see that your child has Down syndrome? I mean, that's ugly, man.
I don't think that's who Missourians are. So
that is not who Missourians are.
Fundamentally,
that is not who Missourians are.
You have
Melanie's legislation is better than that. It says, no, you can't do that.
You have a pendulum here, and you had the laws were over here. Then you took this law and went over here. And the public maybe somewhere over here. Amendment 3 went way over here.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the stuff. It makes sense to come out with give some, I think rape and incest I think that's where the public is. I think safe, legal, and rare is where they are. Amendment 3, the current law is not safe, legal, and rare. It's load up the truck. But let me ask you another question. So let's say, Melanie, and you pass this HGR.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it'll take some twists and turns. End of session, let's say you have something that Governor Keogh can put on the August ballot of 26.
Mm-hmm.
If you just send it back, you've got a Cole County judiciary that has majority pro-life folks. You have one radical pro-infanticide judge who was the author of Amendment 3. I have a little test, and I learned this from you. You were talking about gun control once. I have found if you come in and say, I'm pro-abortion or I'm against abortion, you're probably pro-life, right? If you come in and use the word,
absolutely pro-life,
if you use the word reproductive freedom, I bet you're liberal. You're pro-choice.
Yeah, exactly.
The
There's some key
language
terms
was
that kind of give it
written
away.
bizarrely. It was almost written like a campaign ad for it. If you don't address the makeup of the Cole County judiciary, are you not just wasting your time?
I think, well, now you're talking about another issue that we have to address, right? When it comes to the judiciary and potentially the Missouri court plan.
Your constituents, well, let me stop you on the court plan.
Mm-hmm.
There were 2 rulings on Amendment 3 done in this state.
Okay.
One by Judge Chris Limbaugh.
That's right, which I 100% agree with.
Who was selected by the governor in a process very similar to the Missouri plan.
Yes.
The father of Amendment 3, the author of Amendment 3, was an elected Democrat, switched parties for political expediency, got elected as a Republican judge, has authored every liberal pro-choice decision the state's had. Your constituents and your neighbors are beholden to the Cole County judiciary. He was elected. I think a major problem for the folks that want to change the Missouri plan is you've got the most left-wing judge east of Kansas City and west of St. Louis. The author of the infanticide amendment is an elected judge.
Well, this is the first time I've heard this topic discussed, but it's certainly worth having.
The pro-choice. What I like about the pro-choice, but they're aggressive.
Yeah,
they
are
work
that.
it. The pro-life cause has been dormant, and I'd like to dig into that. If you got
well, everybody gets lazy when they're on top, man. We were on top for a while. We quit fighting the way we need to.
You got time for the question?
Yeah, cool.
So this is something I talked to Jeff Knight about. Were you contacted to help on the Amendment 3 campaign?
I'll tell you by who.
Yeah.
Hardy Billington.
Okay.
And that's it. I wasn't contacted. Hardy Billington's about the most pro-life man you'll ever meet.
You ain't gonna meet. If you find a more pro-life dude than Hardy, I'd like to meet.
He's a legislator from Poplar Bluff, your hometown.
Absolutely. Great man.
But as far as the statewide organizations, never once reached out to me.
So, here's my thing. And let's just talk hogs, dogs, and logs.
Yeah.
You and I don't mince words. Missouri Right to Life has some folks who I believe are pro-life, that are truly pro-life, that maybe we're frustrated with them, but after seeing Amendment 3, and like you said, how broad it is, are like, we got to come back together here. And I'm sure Missouri Right to Life has probably put out things that you're a jerk, right, and probably pissed you off a little bit. I know a lot of folks that are pissed at them, and they're pissed at a lot of folks. If they called you today and said, hey, we are in a crisis, I'd like to start working together and be the aggressive folks like the pro-choicers are, is that a call you'd take and a meeting you'd take?
Right away. I do. Absolutely.
I think there's, they may have something they didn't like you did, right? I'm sure they do. You may have something you don't like they did. I'm sure you do. I'm a little more sympathetic to that argument, if you want the truth, if you want honesty. But I do think the cold reality of the state of Missouri, of places like Pike County, has some of the most liberal abortion laws in the entire world, in the entire globe. You have almost an encouragement of infanticide. I think you have to have all hands on deck.
That's right. So there needs to be a coming together of these statewide organizations and your legislators. If there was a bridge at one point in time that had been burned, it's time to build that bridge back again.
Jeff Knight had almost the exact same thing. He said, I reached out to get signs, but he goes, you know what? And he may run for Senate next summer, and if he is, good. But if he's not, I think him and Amy would spend some time promoting whatever the amendment's called.
Exactly. I'm sure they would.
And I think a lot of folks think you'll never get the pro-life people together. I think if you have leadership from folks like you that have cool pullovers like that, and folks like Missouri Right to Life, and the religious community. And you do it in August.
And a guy that knows how to negotiate that building, like Jeff Knight does.
Yep. I think there's a lot of folks who, you may have a few folks that Missouri Right to Life has ticked off to the point where they're just not going to get on board. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a lot of folks like you, like Jeff Knight, that are waiting for the phone call and want to come together as a pro-life community around something like what Melanie's come up with, and use the ballot, whatever you want to call it. I have to call it ballot candy because Flat Doug's behind you. But whatever you're going to do, this is a tactic that, again, the Democrats are aggressive and the Republicans are passive. Mm-hmm. And the pro-choice folks are the most aggressive folks. And look, on some level, you have to tip your hat to the success. I mean, they did. Good for them, right?
Well, I mean, they won this round, but the fight ain't over.
Well, they won the round. Sometimes you have
but
to
the fight ain't over. The fight ain't over.
Are you sure about that?
I am, absolutely. It'll go back to the ballot. I have no doubt it gets back on the ballot, and the Missourians will see something that makes better sense to them than Amendment 3 did. And I have no doubt that the voters of the state of Missouri will have another say in this.
I think they'll have another say in this. I think whether it turns out like maybe you or I might think, it will be dependent on two things. One, do you put something that folks view as reasonable? Do you put something on the ballot that people view as not going back to what you did have, but not going where you are now? I think you're going to have to put in some exceptions for rape and incest, right?
So it's altogether possible that the majority of voters in the state of Missouri and I aren't in the same position here. I might be to the right of the majority of voters in the state of Missouri.
Yes, I would agree with that.
With that being said,
not that far.
But not that far. And the majority of voters in the state of Missouri aren't where Amendment 3 was. Once they're able to take a close look at it, once they understand exactly what it had in it versus what Melanie Stennett's HJR has, much more in line with where Missourians are.
So I think two things. One, you've got to go put something that is reasonable. I think if you gave Missourians a choice to go back to what the law was 6 months ago or what the law is today, I think it would all depend on it's easier to get a no than a yes, and I think you'd lose.
Yeah.
If you put something on that is...
Well, it's easier to defend a no than it is a yes.
100%.
Yeah.
I think if you switch it around and you say, this is not what was the law, but it's not what the law is now, it's the middle ground, I think that is a race that's winnable. My second point.
I think that's right.
I do think the pro-life community has to put aside some hurt feelings, has to grow up a little, and folks like either Susan Klein needs to call you or you need to call Susan Klein.
Right.
And people like you, I just don't. I watched the no campaign, and I thought the damn thing was 3 yards in a cloud of dust and got closer than I thought it could.
Yeah.
But had all folks inside the movement say it was united. I say when you have Mike and Connie Sirapoy ostracized from the movement, there's a problem.
That's right.
And I think in order
when you go around calling people like
100%.
Ben Baker and Brian Seitz rhinos,
yes,
that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You'll never find two more Christian conservative men on the planet.
Very hard to win. What is going to be an incredibly hard thing to win against a very well-funded opposition who knows how to win and is aggressive. And if this was the roles reversed, the Cole County Judiciary would be reformed like that.
That's right.
They would have no problems. So I guess my question would be, I think it's possible to get everybody on the same team. I actually do. I know personally myself, I'm pro-life. Now, I'm pro-life because I'm like 16 years younger than my mother. I'm pro-life because I have a positive story, not because you're a rhino and I want to attack you.
Right.
I think that everybody in this, the legislative leadership and Missouri Right to Life, has maybe done some things that weren't great. But I think because of the direness of the situation, everybody's going to have to put aside some feelings and reach some hands out.
Well, and I'll say, despite what you might have heard on Facebook, John Patterson is absolutely resolved to do everything possible to bring this to a position that is a win for the pro-life movement.
I think what I heard John say out here was, I think he wants to see the HJR and he wants to talk about the Patterson's dude. Like he's a little bit like Keel. He likes to win. So
now, I want to say this. Some moron on Facebook's going to take this clip and call me a rhino. I don't care what they think.
Yeah.
Because they're wrong. And they're probably getting paid somewhere by somebody to push some agenda. Is this my camera? Can I look at it?
Hilton, can you cue him up?
Hilton, is this my camera right here?
Yeah, he's got you now.
Don't believe everything you see on Facebook. Everyone has an agenda. Everyone. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Thank you for that time.
That's like a great PS.
Thank you.
All right, Kelton, we got to clip that. That's a wonderful public service announcement that we're going to use. But going forward, I do think there's an energy to some grassroots folks. There's some experience and that there is now vigor on some folks that are grassroots folks too. Different flavor of grassroots. I think I can just tell you from my perspective.
I do love
I'm
that you say grassroots, though, because there are a group of people that pass themselves off as grassroots who I think are really just paid lobbyists.
I think that's true. I also think there's some grassroots folks who are just negative people, and they like to throw fits. And
that is counterproductive.
If you put them in charge of being rush chairman, the sorority, the fraternity would die because no one would want to join because there's negative, right? I join things because it's positive.
It's a Ronald Reagan optimism.
Yes, and that's the thing. That's a great point. I don't want to keep you. I know you got appointments, but I do think the pro-life cause somewhere along the way lost that Ronald Reagan optimism, and it got into negativity and attacks.
Calling everyone names who aren't 100% all the time in lockstep. They might be 99.9%, but that's not good enough.
It's fair to say some of the things the pro-life community was advocating for were a little bit far afield from the cause of life. But all that aside, they have their side on why they thought they were right. A lot of other folks have their side. I do think you've reached the point, though, where it's time for somebody to break bread and say, are we, I'm never going to think what you did was right. And they may say the same, but you are the state's foremost pro-life group. I am a leader in the Missouri House of Representatives. We both are pro-life. Let's freaking go.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the point is.
I have no doubt that everyone in leadership at the Missouri House of Representatives is more than willing to have that conversation.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think there's Patterson mentioned a package of things inside Amendment 3 to be pro-life. I didn't hear him rule out an HJR.
Not at all.
What probably, don't you think this probably is an SJR?
Well, I hope it's an HJR.
But here's the thing.
But ultimately, it doesn't matter as long as something gets on the ballot.
But
I don't care who. If it goes well, we all win.
Chad, you've done this for a while now. Practically speaking, the way this is going to work
it might very well
is going to be probably the second to last day of session on Thursday, maybe the legislative day of Wednesday in the Senate. They have to PQ this, and it goes on the ballot, and they send it to the House, and you guys
look. Melanie Stinnet's a good friend of mine. I want it to be her HJR, but I know that she's committed to the cause enough that if it ends up being an SJR, she still likes that idea, it's, as long as it's going the right direction. So, that's what you do when you're a team player, When you're in the cause of pro-life, anything that furthers the cause is a win.
I think that's right, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it breaks down. Do you pin all your hopes on one thing? Do you pass a series of things?
Oh no, you can't. Yeah. You cannot pin all your hopes on one thing. You've got to put multiple things out there in hopes that something wins.
Which to me is where, frankly, Susan Klein's experience comes in. Susan Klein has fought this fight for a very long time. She knows every nook and cranny of what happens. If you look to the legislative issues and how to navigate them, then you look to the courts, and you have to navigate the courts on this. Then you look to the politics. I think you need a lot of people in that room looking at every aspect and how I think in order to win this, you've got to have everything.
It's got to be well organized. It's got to be a broad group of people who are laser focused and well organized. It's the only way that you can switch that pendulum back the way that it needs to go.
It'd be interesting. So tell me something that nobody's talking about that you think is going to be a big deal this session. The bear legislation?
No. Are you black bear awareness?
No, bear pharmaceuticals.
Oh, bear pharmaceuticals. Yes, excuse me, yes.
That's going to be a big deal.
Yes, that's a very big deal.
Yeah.
That's a very big deal, that bear legislation. I call it Roundup. It's not just Roundup, but that's the thing that most people are familiar with because it's just, a household product that literally everyone has been around, right? So this idea that you can sue this agricultural organization because of the way it's labeled, well, that's ridiculous. It's labeled the way the government says it has to be labeled, right? So this is it's a good bill for rural Missouri, It's a good bill. You know who else it's a good bill for? Literally anyone who eats.
Yep.
Literally anyone who eats, it's a win for, man. So it's a good bill. It needs to happen. It needs to happen fairly quickly. Yeah, it's not front page. You know, it's not Second Amendment. It's not pro-life, but it's important, and it's something that's certainly good for rural Missouri.
You've served with several folks that are now in the Missouri Senate. Give me one that you're excited to watch navigate the Senate.
Curtis Gregory came over to the office. He came over to the office on Monday, sat down. We hung out. We
think my
talked.
man here would agree with you.
Yeah.
He'd be on board.
We sat down and talked, hung out a little bit. It was like old times. Jamie Berger did the same thing. You know, they're now on the other side of the building. Jamie sent me a text. He said, we got some little Smokies over here, man, if you want to come over. And I was like, I'm on my way, you know.
They're the real enemy now.
Yeah.
But we always talk about all the Democrats. I'm like, no. If you're a
Yeah.
House member, the enemy's the Senate. All right, now give me a couple of freshman reps that folks keep an eye on.
Yeah, let's keep an eye on a few folks that I think are going to be movers and shakers. Carolyn Caton out of Jackson County.
Ball of fire.
What I'm going to call it rural Jackson County. There's not a lot of rural Jackson County, but it's a little bit rural-ish Jackson County, right?
Rural-ish is a good way to put that.
I got to tell you, who else you got to look out for is Tony Harbison.
Oh, I like that guy.
Oh, man,
Yeah.
he is sharp, and nothing gets by him. You know, you're going to meet him. He's got cowboy boots on. He's got jeans on. He's got a little southeast Missouri drawl going on. Don't let that fool you. He knows what's going on. I know another guy like that.
Let me think. I like Phelps.
Oh, Brandon Phelps, fantastic, yeah.
Obviously, our man Bill Irwin is going to be a star. I'll give you a guy that I think is going to pass a lot of legislation, Mike Steinmeier.
You know, I had lunch with Mike Steinmeier today, he and his wife, and what a sharp dresser. I like to think I dress fairly well. That guy puts me to shame.
You do. I'll tell you this. Here's my thought. There's a couple legislative bodies that you serve in that produce great legislation. The Independent City Council has a history of producing some talent. It is a knife-fighting, cutthroat place, and I think it produces very good legislators. And I think Steinmeier's experience there is going to be helpful.
I will say this. You know, he's an independent city councilman for years. I used to be mayor in a small town. I will tell, and I mean this, local city politics are even more ugly than statewide politics. They just absolutely are. Because you know the folks, right? You bump into them at the grocery store. You go to church with them. If the governor of the state of Missouri makes a department head change, it doesn't make the newspaper. But if a small town mayor fires the police chief,
big deal.
You know, and there are hurt feelings for the rest of somebody's life.
For the rest of time.
Yeah.
Oh, last question. If you were gonna, if you were bringing your lovely girlfriend in town and you wanted to put her family up at a hotel, what hotel would you put them up at?
Every time we go to the Courtyard.
Dude knows what's up.
Every time. Also,
cheers to United Fiber, the absolute best broadband, and as Senator Hagan would say, the great Northwest. Lastly, I think it was. I always felt this speaker's race was a bigger deal to certain interest groups or radio shows than it really was in reality.
I think the vote proved that.
Looking forward, you had half a dozen freshmen vote for Representative Sparks. Those half a dozen freshmen, there's no way, if you would have been asked to do that vote, you would have been at best guessing. Like, I don't think there was a vote your freshman year, but
your first day in the building, you don't really know either person. What you do know is you're getting 100 emails and 100 text messages and 100 phone calls from somebody saying, I want you to do this or else. That's what you're getting, right?
So, I think...
And I mean these outside groups. No one in the building is saying that to you.
Look, if you're Dale, there's been some fissures there and some issues, right? I get that.
But for the handful of freshmen that didn't vote for the speaker, there's no ill will.
Yeah, that's my question.
Absolutely not. You know, it was your first day in the building. There's absolutely no reason why we can. You know that. I don't want them to think that they're going to be ostracized in any way. They're a part of the team, equal to anybody else.
Now they go around and call you a criminal because you raise money to reelect your colleagues, and I think they start to go over here. I mean, I always thought that Sparks. Look, it was an ill-conceived plan, obviously in hindsight. But was it really going to work? Probably not. But it's his right to run.
Absolutely. Everybody has a right to run for speaker.
Yeah.
You don't get a right to say that if you're donating to other Republicans to keep your supermajority, that's somehow unethical, because it's absolutely not.
If I was sitting in your caucus room,
right,
and I'm Ben Keithley, who they
Or
outspent the Democrats 10-1.
Phil Oler King, Mike Jones,
Yeah.
Colin Wellenkamp.
Bill Allen.
Bill Allen. These folks that wouldn't be there if they didn't get help from the party.
And these folks are going to need it again.
Going to need it again.
I think I'd be a little bit like, dude.
That's exactly right.
You're what do you?
Exactly
would you
right.
prefer a Democrat to
That's
be?
right. If you want to run for speaker. Leave everyone else out of it.
Plus, I think it's an odd look when you guys had arguably defending 111 would be harder than getting 111. You defended 111 seats. It probably is not the time to complain about the operation.
That morning I woke up in November, election day.
You a little surprised?
I was thinking that morning we'd lose 4 or 5 seats, and I believed that. And then at 9 o'clock that night, man, we held them all. We held 111 seats. We lost one, but we picked one up. Right?
Yeah.
Push. It's a push. We held 111 seats, and that's
Incredible.
because the Republican Party works hard together. Everybody puts into it to keep that supermajority, and that is a conservative thing.
I mean, what would you do if you looked out at the take the top 10 competitive races, the races that were decided by the smallest margin? I'll bet you probably won. Let's say you won 6 of those.
It's really
in those
absolutely
6, you probably outspent the Democrats at least 10-1 in all those, right?
absolutely. So I
I don't think you win some. I don't think Phil Oler King is back in the legislature without you outspending the Democrats significantly.
He would if we didn't have a conservative like Phil Oler King in that district. We'd have a young liberal activist in that place.
Who'd be running against Ann Wagner in 2 years.
Absolutely right.
I kept you longer than I asked for. Chad
Always
Perkins,
a pleasure.
Thank you so much for the time, bud. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Kelton, Chiefs -8. You're gonna take the Chiefs, I'm sure.
Yeah. We'll take the
give
Chiefs. No, maybe 6.5.
See, I'm gonna give 8 because these have been blowouts. Even last night's game was a blowout. Kelton's a homer. He always gives the points. I'm actually the one that'll be stingy and say I'll take the Chiefs, but not the points. I'm gonna give the points. I think the Texans have won their biggest game of the year, and they're playing on house money, and it's gonna be cold, and Mahomes has been there before. I will say this one will be a little lopsided like some of these others, but we'll see. Sunday, freshman episode. Representative Phelps, Steinmeier, Ray Reid, and I don't know. We're going to try to find a second Democrat. I've got calls into one. We'll see how that goes, and we'll see you Sunday for This Week in Missouri Politics.